deadly flu is on the move. The virus has arrived in yet another province.
They're concerned about any health problem that's on the mainland. It's not going to stay there.
Showing the vaccine only thought to be 10% effective.
Nationwide, there are already more than 41,000 cases confirmed. Every state in the country reporting widespread flu activity.
As of this morning, 18 countries around the world have reported cases of the flu within their borders.
Numbers out of Australia as of mid-October are concerning. If you get sick, stay home.
Before I get too deep into the contents of my specific go bag, it's important, I think, to point out that my family is big into camping. So most of the gear that I have is stuff that I've already had. It isn't stuff that I specifically get together just for a go bag and it sits in the corner in case of an emergency. This is stuff that I use regularly throughout the summer when I go on camping trips with the family. That being said, I always keep it packed and I always keep it stocked with food, water, and everything I need in case I need to just grab it and get out of the house. And to some people that may sound paranoid, and I think depending on what you have in your bag that might be the case, that might not be. But it seems like there's a growing need for this sort of thing. We've seen over and over again, disasters can happen. They don't happen often, but they do happen, and when they do happen, you definitely want to be at least minimally prepared. And I think the bag that I have is very specific to my environment and location, so definitely tweak it depending on your specific needs, like say medications you may need, and of course taking into consideration the kind of climate you live in. But think, for example, what happened in Katrina. People were without water, had to get out of there quickly, and how nice is it to just have a bag already prepared that you can just grab and know that you have everything in it for at least 3 days. You can live out of that bag totally. We saw this again in California with the various wildfires that they have. New York, when they got pounded with a hurricane, Puerto Rico. Sometimes they didn't have to leave their house, but they were just out of power. Power was knocked out for days. So I don't think it's being paranoid having just the bare minimum of things required to have 3 days to keep you alive in your bag at all times for the entire family. And of course, if you do have a family, keep in mind in this bag, there's going to be a lot of things that you only need one of for the entire family, and then everyone else would have their own bag with their own food and their own clothes, right? Because it's got everything in it, and every other bag beyond that is extra. For example, you don't need multiple stoves, you won't need multiple water filters, and depending on the size of the tent and how many people in your family, you won't need multiple tents. But like I said, we do a lot of camping, so all this stuff is just nice and neatly packed in our bag, ready to go at all times. And to the contents. So the first thing you want to make sure you have enough of, think for example in Katrina, water around them was contaminated. So you're going to want to make sure you have enough water either on hand or a means of filtering water for 3 days. In my bag, I have both. I have cheap bottles of water as well as 2 methods of filtering it. I have a water filter that's compact that is capable of producing a lot of filtered water. It just screws onto a water bottle and you pump it, and the water that comes out is safe to drink. In addition to that, I also have a life straw, just in case something happens with the pump. Water is going to be your most important thing, and all you have to do is take that same water bottle, fill it up with water, stick this straw in, drink it through the straw, and everything you drink is going to be fine. You can also use it and just stick your face right next to a river, and away you go. Inexpensive way to make sure that you have enough drinking water. Moving on to food. Now, there's multiple ways that you can do this. One way is to go to the grocery store and just buy non-perishable food items that you can stock up on cheaply, which would be like nuts, things like ramen noodle soup, things that aren't going to spoil, things that are going to last for a very long time, inexpensive, and it's going to keep you alive. You can also buy things like beef jerky that will also last a long time, give you enough protein to sustain you, as well as I'm a big fan of Mountain House freeze-dried food. My favorite just so happens to be lasagna, but they're all pretty good. They're a little bit more expensive, but probably going to taste better than ramen noodle soup. Probably also a little easier to prepare since you just pour boiling water into the pouch and away you go. So again, make sure you have enough to keep you alive for 3 days in your house at all times. For example, a power outage, everything in your refrigerator is going to spoil. You will always have your freeze-dried food as a backup. One thing about the freeze-dried food is you will need to prepare it, and for that I have a couple methods of doing it. I have a simple propane stove very small, very compact. In case you have no access to fire, you can just boil some water on this. Very inexpensive. It will also work well for if you have to boil water to drink, as well as a mess kit and a cup. Very simple things. They're kind of, I guess we'll call them essentials, but if you had to go without them, you could build a fire if you had to. But just something to keep in mind that you will need something to prepare your food if it's a mountain house versus the non-perishables that you buy like nuts and beef jerky. Those you can just eat right away and there's no preparation required. And as we said with fire, it's probably not a bad idea to get some stormproof matches, ones that can be basically submerged, guaranteed to start in case you need to make a campfire or something like that. And again, that's just in case, but for me, I happen to take these with me when I'm backpacking anyway, so it's stuff that I keep stocked up on regularly regardless. Now, if things get really bad, I also have a Swiss Army knife, which has a magnifying glass on it, so if I have to, I can start fire with that as well. Also, it's a good idea to have some sort of a multi-tool on you. I prefer my Swiss Army knife as well as I have a Gerber multi-tool. They're about $30, probably a little bit more practical than the Swiss Army knife as far as having the pliers. It has a knife on it and everything else you're going to need. But that's for you to decide. I have both. And again, you're going to want to have some kind of a water bottle on you, just some kind of a container to keep your filtered water in. I prefer my Mira insulated water bottle, but honestly, you could get away with something a little bit more inexpensive or just use one that you already have. For convenience though, just use whatever you have in the house or check the links below. I have everything that I'm mentioning listed below in case you want to check prices and comparison. It's all there for you to check out. So now you've taken care of water and food. The next essential would be shelter. I have a very simple 2-person tent, inexpensive and compact. It also fits in my backpack. And again, you're gonna need to take into consideration the size of your family. In case you're gonna need a bigger tent or a bigger bag, pick out what's best for your size family. So then moving on again, pick out a proper sleeping bag. I actually have a couple of them that I like. I have a Teton one that I like. It's a little bit thinner. And then I also have a mummy style, which is a little more compact and a little warmer. And it also can be paired with another sleeping bag. There's a left and a right side in case you're going with your wife. And again, this bag is for emergencies and take into consideration your climate. If you're in a warm area, you're probably not going to need them, but I live in an area where winters get very cold. If your heat's knocked out, I have a whole bunch of hand warmers. They're inexpensive. You can toss them in your sleeping bag to heat it up a little bit more in case your sleeping bag is not quite good enough, or if you find yourself getting caught in your car, depending on where you keep your bag. I actually have a little kind of emergency kit in my car also, which has these in them because in case your car breaks down for half an hour, you don't freeze to death. It's not a bad idea to have these stashed somewhere in your glove compartment or anywhere else. An inexpensive way to just make sure you don't freeze to death. And now we're starting to get into the things that are possibly, arguably a little bit more of a luxury. You don't need a sleeping bag on a pad. You can throw your sleeping bag on the ground and be fine, but I have a very compact sleeping pad that I use just for a little added comfort. If, for example, my house burns down, I'm going to want to be able to get a nice night of sleep. And also when I'm backpacking, it's vacation technically, so I definitely want a good night's sleep. So for me, the sleeping pad is also something that's inside of my go bag, as well as a decent pillow. I found one, initially it was like kind of a compact pillow with like cloth in it, but I ended up getting one that's a blow-up pillow, which in my opinion is almost a little bit more comfortable and far more compact, and it fits inside of my cup that I have. So you have your sleeping pad, your sleeping bag, and your inflatable pillow. It's also not a bad idea to pack in there some toiletries, so like things like toothpaste, toothbrush, floss, any medications you might need. Use your own judgment in what you're going to need for that, for your specific needs, as well as a first aid kit. And this is where I start to get just a little bit more paranoid. I've obviously done a lot of research with influenzas and outbreaks and stuff like that, and having read the book, The Great Influenza, one of the things they talk about is how likely it is to happen again, and how devastated areas that were populated like New York and Chicago, how badly they were hit. And so for me, when I was doing research for my book, Generations End, which is on Audible, I'm a little paranoid about that happening at some point. So if you live somewhere where you take the train a lot, it might not be a bad idea to also just invest in some cheap masks. And not all masks are the same. You want to make sure that it's going to be able to block out things like viruses. I'll post a link for the ones that I bought below, but add that to your first aid kit, as well as simple hand sanitizer and rubber gloves. Speaking of toiletry, one thing I've noticed in all the go bags that I've noticed is none of them, or a lot of them I should say, don't have toilet paper. It doesn't take up much room. You can buy coreless rolls of toilet paper, very cheap, very compact, because at some point you're going to need to take a dump. Also, in addition to that, I have a emergency radio, crank radio, which has a light on it, and a radio in case power is knocked out, cell tower is knocked out, which has happened to me. My cell phone did not work because there was some problem. I don't remember why, but it can happen. So I have a emergency radio with a crank on it, which you can also use to charge your phone or any of the devices you may have with you that you need. But the flashlight on it is kind of cheap. I have a 1-inch mag light that I also pack. I'm a huge fan of this one. It's a tough little guy, which I keep inside of my kind of front pocket, like hip pocket on my Osprey backpack for easy access when I'm walking around. But I also carry some solar panels for charging other devices. So like if you have a cell phone, like if you're out in the woods, for me backpacking, like I said, this is a way for me to charge my cell phone, which is what I use for taking pictures with, so that's why I have that. But if your power is knocked out, you still can keep things like that charged. Just a thought. One thing for me too also is if this bag, if I have to ever pull it out, it's going to be a bad day. And for me, when I have a bad day, one thing that always makes it a little bit better, no matter how bad it is a bowl of ice cream. I know it sounds funny, but I did pack a little. I also pack a iPod Touch in my go bag, and on that is documentation of everything that's in my house, any valuables that you may have, copies of any documents you might need, marriage certificate or anything else for insurance reasons, and also a couple movies or something like that, just in case you do get caught somewhere. At least you'll be able to get your mind off of things and be entertained, and have a method in charging it. And speaking of charging it, I do have an extra long cord so that you can set up your solar panels somewhere away from the device and then have the cord run to the device and charge it like in your tent or something in the shade so it doesn't overheat. And in addition to that, I have very inexpensive headphones. And another thing that I pack in mine, which I usually don't see a lot in go bags, is cash. I keep at least $100 in singles, not in big bills, so you don't need to ask for change anywhere you go. Doesn't take up much room, and it's light, just in case you need to buy something. And again, that's $100 in singles for every member of the house, and every member of your house is going to carry their own cash in their own backpack. So obviously there's a lot of things that you don't need to carry duplicates of, so everyone else in your household will have their own food, their own clothes, their own bedroll, but you won't necessarily need extra stoves or extra tents, depending on how big your household is. It's also not a bad idea to carry an extra pair of pants, underwear, and for me, I'm a little funny about that. I'm very specific on the socks and shirts that I've packed. They are moisture-wicking socks in case your feet get wet, but that's just me. That's getting a little specific. And again, this is just for emergencies. This is roughly 3 days. Pick yourself a backpack. The bag that I use is an Osprey Exos light backpack. This bag is good for about 3 days. So I would say this is the minimum. If you're going to want it for more than that, I would definitely get a bigger size. Osprey has an excellent line of bags. I'll post a link for everything that I mentioned that's in my bag in the comments below. Let me know what you guys have in yours, if there's anything I'm missing, and I'll talk to you next time.